correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome to Me and Steve Talk RPG, the podcast where me and my friend Steve try and help you get the most out of your role-playing game experience. Hey folks, welcome back to Me and Steve Talk RPGs. I'm here tonight with my good friend Steve.
Hi, Steve.
Hello, how are you today?
Oh, tired.
Weather was nicer today than they called for. I was happy with that.
Yeah, I will take a day when they call for thunderstorms and not have thunderstorms.
Yes. Well, at least my house and at work, it didn't rain at all, I don't think.
No, we did. I don't think we got any rain. It was gorgeous today.
Yeah.
Now
Yesterday,
tomorrow,
on the other hand.
yeah, yesterday woke me up out of a dead sleep because we had a lightning strike that was close enough that it shook the house. Like, you know
Ooh.
how when thunder hits and it's loud enough to shake the house? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I love watching thunderstorms, but I don't know.
From a distance.
Well, ish.
On a porch.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of cool. I have windows at the back of my living room that look kind of out over the edge of the valley.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get a pretty good, you can look out those and usually watch the storm pretty decent or look out the windows on the front side of the house. But
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah, I can peek out, pick a direction and watch a storm, or go for a little drive up the road and watch a storm really nicely. But yeah, that's beside the point.
All right. So let's see. Before we get into what we're talking about, we have a D20 Network podcast of the week or spotlight or whatever it is we call it to share with everybody. Who is that this week, Steve?
Yeah, that podcast is Story Told.
Yes. Story Told is, I guess you could call it an RPG variety show. They do game discussions, interviews, tend probably towards more narrative games, a lot of World of Darkness, Powered by the Apocalypse, Blades in the Dark, Forged in the Dark, that kind of stuff. A lot of really cool narrative indie stuff. And they also just started, as we record, only one episode is actually out for it. They just started a new AP using Promethean the Created. It's called The Body Electric. And as we record, they have one episode live. So
hard to say when you'll actually hear this, but
yeah, they'll probably have 2 or 3 out by the time this goes live. But anyway, they're very cool. Logan and Griffin are your hosts over there. And great show. You can find it at storytold.libsyn.com, or there'll be a link in the show notes.
Sweet.
Yep. So this week, the brains of Steve and Steve have decided to talk about house rules, which is something I think, we've kind of touched on it here and there. And I think everybody kind of knows, well, maybe not everybody. Most of your experienced gamers know what we're talking about. We say house rules. And, well, maybe we should talk about that for a quick second.
Yeah.
Just in case anyone's not familiar, before we get into what brought the whole topic to mind.
Yeah, let's talk about house rules and when to use them, and then the actual what brought the topic to mind. So,
okay.
A house rule is a rule that is not explicitly stated in the book, or a rule that you've changed how it's stated or how it works, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is as simple as, like, when you crit, you deal double damage plus dice, right? Or, anything like that. There's a lot of house rules that you use in D&D that people just don't realize.
Mm-hmm.
But when I find it the most useful, and when I use house rules, is a lot of times if I read a rule and I'm like, that is too complicated for me to be like, you gotta do 16 plus 4 plus your mod plus this, and no, I'll just throw that all out the window and be like, I don't know, give me a check.
No, but that's, yeah. But house rules can be anything. It could be that you adapt a rule from a different system to the game you're playing. I'm sure there's a lot of people who have assorted house rules around, say, initiative.
Mm-hmm.
Any number of things like that. One that's been brought up in games that we've played is I forget what they called it, but like the double or nothing house rule.
Oh yeah,
with Genesis. Where
I'd never heard that before, but
because every now and then with Genesis, the dice come up in a complete wash. And so I forget exactly how that worked. Was it that you upgrade both sides of the check, roll again, and
Yeah,
if either the triumph or the despair comes up, it's amplified?
I think so. I think that's what that was. That one was like, oh wow, I've never heard that before, but yeah, that's something that I would absolutely try.
Yeah, it could be something as simple as homemade crit charts or anything, crit tables, whatever. They're all kinds of things, but like you said, often they serve some purpose that for your table is
Simplification of yeah.
simpler or more fun.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I did it once, and I would probably do it again. I put exploding dice into Dungeons& and Dragons.
That's interesting.
You roll a 20, roll it again.
There you go.
You just mark that down real quick.
Yeah, that's a little bit different, but yeah.
It was fun because it was like it made those crits a little bit more extreme, you know what I mean?
Mhm. Exploding damage dice could get weird in D&D with the
Yeah.
handfuls you roll sometimes.
Yeah. Exploding dice is a fun house rule to add just to about anything.
Yeah. Well, here's a house rule that I used to use, and this is going into what you were talking about as far as, like, just being simpler. And this was a house rule that was actually done either due to incomplete reading or just not having found the section. This was back when I was running Rifts. And, of course, I've grumbled about it a lot. Rifts organization is, less than stellar. But Rifts has a mechanic called a horror factor, which certain monsters have, and it's well, especially at the time, I equated it to kind of like the sand check in Call of Cthulhu because I played Call of Cthulhu, and so it was kind of like, okay, that's more, that was just kind of how I did it. And so for whatever reason, we had been playing it where if you encounter the monster and everyone rolls their horror factor save, and if you failed, the way we've been playing it is you just kind of sat there, kind of dumbstruck, going, "Da, da, 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 da," you know, kind of like in shock. And, you know, over time, eventually it morphed because you always had that one, and then once you made the save, you were fine. But we eventually modified it because inevitably you end up with this one person who will have a string of just crap rolls
Mhm.
and keep failing it. So, as a house rule to our house rule, we added on that if you failed 3 horror factor checks in a row, you pissed yourself and ran the other way.
Ah,
Okay. So we'd been playing like this for, I don't know, like year and a half. And then I stumble on page 114 of the core rule book, there is, a small paragraph about what you're supposed to do.
Mm-mm.
So
Tear that right out now, throw it out the window, and
So I find this, and it says, like you're supposed to, okay, the character that fails loses initiative. Like you're supposed to roll your horror factor save before you roll initiative.
mhm.
So if you fail, you don't even get to roll. You're the last person to take an action, and you cannot defend yourself against the creature's first attack, which means in Palladium and Melee, you have parry and dodge and all these other things. So, and then it goes on to say, yeah, you snap out and you can rejoin in the second round, we'll call it, right? They call them melees, but I'll get into that because that's another house rule. But
Couldn't that be, like, extremely deadly in Rifts?
oh, yeah. It could plus it's like it's more crap to keep track of. So, when I
Yeah.
found this, and I think there may be another section somewhere because I didn't write it down when I found it 20 some years ago, but that there's actually more penalties and all kinds of crazy crap involved. So,
Wow.
I find this, and so the next session we get together and I read the section to my players. Said, "Look, this is how you're supposed to do it. We've been doing it the way we've been doing it." Every single one of them went, "Let's just keep doing it the way we've been doing it. It's more fun."
Yeah. Yeah, I would too. I'd be like, "Nah, I'm good."
And that was, call it a house rule born out of ignorance, but it was easy and everyone enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, and then there's the house rules that you don't even realize are house rules, right? Like,
Mhm.
back when we played D&D together in person, there was the failed perception check, "Ooh, I have shoes."
Yeah.
That was like was never explicitly stated, but that was what everybody defaulted to.
Yeah, well, it was sort of the miserable failure on a perception check. Like, I rolled a 3. Yeah, I'm man, my shoes are shiny today.
Yeah. "Ooh, look, I got shoes." Yeah. And so what brought this all about was Seth Skorkowski tweeted out a statement that read along the lines of,
I've got it up if you want
"Oh
me to.
yeah, if you want to read it."
Yeah, and this is Seth's tweet. It says, "I've said it before, I'll probably say it 1,000 more times, but house rules should enhance an RPG system, tailoring it for you and your group. That's fun and awesome. But if house rules are necessary to fix or make a system playable, then it's a broken system."
Ta-da. And I absolutely agree with him. I think that is one of the most accurate statements said on Twitter today.
Yeah, and then he goes on in a couple more like follow-up tweets. He said, every RPG he's played for more than 3 sessions had some house ruled added, and so on and so forth. But I get the principle he's bringing up.
Yeah, if you're house ruling the entire system, just the game's broken. Play a different system.
Yeah.
Sorry. Or crazy thought, take the base of that system that you like, house rule everything, and you could play that, sure, if you really want to. That I look, as much as we're like, try other things, I give a little bit of respect to the people that are like, I could play everything in 5th edition. Yeah,
Yes.
make the rules for it. I'd love to see it.
I think some of it comes down to taste, right? You and I have had this discussion. There's elements of the 5th edition design that I'm just not fond of. I'm not terribly crazy about level-based advancement. I'm not crazy about D20 as a core mechanic for reasons that I can't exactly quantify, but you know, there's things that just don't jive for me. Doesn't mean it's bad.
Yeah. No, I my problems with it are more with the, how do I want to word this? My problems with 5th edition now are kind of more with the company and the culture around that.
I think that's fair to say, especially the company and the way that they seem to be packaging the game.
And yeah, there's a lot of, I've complained about this privately, but I'll say it sort of on the podcast. There's a lot of suppression of other games, and they don't want to support the community. It doesn't feel like they want to support their community, and that's it. And I don't know how to say this, but this is a Hasbro thing. I mean, I know Disney's the parent company, but it's very much a Hasbro thing because Hasbro does it with their other products like Nerf or Magic the Gathering. That's another WotC product, but it's very much other games don't exist. We're the only game that exists. Meanwhile, the rest of the community is like, well, yeah, you're the market leader, but we're trying to support indie devs and we're trying to pump up the people that are trying to make this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I have personal issues with a company that is like, nope, we're the only ones.
Yeah. I think it's like to a certain point, I think the slogan they plaster on the front of all their books says a lot, where it says, "Oh, the world's greatest role-playing game." Yeah,
Yeah.
well, here's what I know. I don't know what the world's greatest role-playing game is because it probably varies by the person playing the game. I do, however, know that there is no one greatest one, therefore, I think the logo they put on the front of their books, or not logo, slogan, there's the word, they put on the front of their books is a load of crap. If they wanna say the world's most popular role-playing game, I got no problem at all with that. But I think also, well, let's break into this a little bit. The kind of isolationism you see a lot of times with the D&D community, or parts of it, I should say, not all of it, because there's a lot of people out there that play D&D and a lot of other things too. But
Yeah.
you have this group that's all they want to do, and like, look, I good for you that you enjoy it.
Yeah. I respect your tenacity. I don't have that will or want.
Yeah.
I understand where you're coming from, and if you really, really like Dungeons and Dragons and that's what you like doing, that is great. I'm glad to hear it. Honestly, and I've said this before about my goal is to grow the community. And if that means growing the community and including the people that are all they want to play is Dungeons and Dragons, that's great. They can be part of the community too. They can be part of the conversation of what makes good game design because
Absolutely.
they just have a different taste than I do.
Right.
But I think my problem is that sometimes when that olive branch is extended, and I'm not saying this about necessarily any of our audience, but sometimes when that olive branch is extended, it's swatted away like, no, I don't want anything to do with you weirdos. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what leaves me with a like, hey, we're just trying to be copacetic here, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Like, I'm not opposed to playing 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. It's not my preferred system, but
I'll admit it, with Spelljammer coming out, I'm actually thinking about going back to it.
yeah, I might go back to it for Eberron too. I keep talking about wanting to find something else, and I keep falling back onto, Keith Baker saying that the one core thing is viewing magic as a science
And
that
that's
can
what,
be taken as a technology.
yeah, 5e does that really well.
And the D&D magic system does that.
Yeah.
Most other magic systems don't. I'm not going to say that's a flaw or a good thing necessarily, but
It's just a fact of the system.
yeah, and to me, that being one of the core premises behind the design of the world, it's hard for me to get away from that.
Yeah.
I've heard, on our network, there's the guys over at Eberron Renewed that play Eberron and Genesis, and it's great. But it gets away from that, to me, that core premise, and it's just one of those weird things that I fixate on.
Yeah. No, I understand completely. I agree with you. I think there's certain things. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If I want to play a high fantasy game, if I want to play heroic fantasy, which is the term that I've dubbed it, that is absolutely the system I'm grabbing. I'm grabbing D&D in either 5th edition or an earlier edition, and that is what I'm going to play it in because it does heroic fantasy fantastically. And it makes you feel like a hero.
Yes.
Like that system, and I want this to sound, it is a bit of praise for it. That system makes you feel like you are super powered, like you are super strong. There's a million monks, but you are the best monk.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what that system does really well. That's not always the stories I want to tell. A lot of times I want to tell the stories where you are not the best at your job. You are just another person doing your job. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like Cyborg, and just to draw an unfair comparison, Cyborg during character creation, yeah, you make a character that can do their job. They're not the best person at it
Oh, no.
because they're super expendable.
Yeah, Cyborg is a meat grinder. It
Yeah,
really is, and it's a
Morkborg's the
blast.
same way. Morkborg is the same exact way. You're not the best person at your job. As a matter of fact, you're probably the worst, but that's okay because you're not going to last very long.
And if you do, it's fun.
Congratulations. You get to live another day. I don't know if that's a reward or a threat. Like,
But yeah, and so that's, I don't know how we got there from house rules.
I don't care. It's the conversation I want to have. So
All right, so yeah,
no, I like I said, I welcome anybody who your only system's Dungeons and Dragons and you come to us for the awesome tool tips. All right, great. I'm glad to hear it.
yeah,
We will continue to provide tool tips and continue to suggest other games as well.
yeah. I don't think we're never going to be a podcast that goes nitty gritty on D&D. That's just not who we are. That's not what we want to do. But I think one of the things that we do try to do is present a lot of things that you can apply to D&D or whatever game it is you're playing.
Well, I don't think we're going to go nitty gritty on any game. Like,
No.
we've delved into games, but usually when we delve into a game, it's like, hey, I don't understand this. Somebody explain it to me. Like,
Yeah.
when we had, who did we have on that explained Fate?
JT.
JT was on and talked about Fate. That was because we were both like, I don't know anything about Fate. Do you know anything about Fate? No, I don't know anything about Fate. I have a book here, but I'd much rather talk to somebody to try and figure it out, like Genesis. We both had read Genesis to some extent, and then we had GM Chris on to talk about Genesis. And it was like, okay.
Now we get it. Now we're addicted.
Yeah, now we get it. Now I understand. I get it. It's the best system ever made. I understand. But no, I jest, but seriously, we're just those people that, like, when I don't understand something, I'd much rather have somebody sit down and either walk me through it or explain it to me, right?
Right.
I'm good about racking my head against a wall, but sometimes it's like I need somebody to talk to.
Yeah. Well, generally that's bad for the wall when I do that with my head. But anyway,
It's either bad for my head.
well, I'm not saying it's good for mine, but no, but I think that the other thing is that since we're off down this rabbit hole, let's just keep going for a little while. Some systems,
It's like when you get off the highway and you start driving in a direction and there's nowhere to turn around. Like, I guess we're going this direction for a little while.
So part of where for me, I guess I like multiple systems
Mhm.
is that depending on what kind of story you want to tell, like you said, D&D is very good at that heroic fantasy thing where you're the big larger than life heroes. But it doesn't do not that very well. That's just the way the system is designed. And sometimes, I don't want it I want the story to be more of a slog. I don't want to be this big super powered, as a player. I don't always want to be Mr. Badass. Sometimes I want it to be a struggle. That's half the fun.
Let's talk about we were talking about house rules. Let's talk
Yes.
about some of my house rules that I've played with D&D with.
Okay.
And completely talking about completely changed the system. I had a game that I started, and I kind of annoyed my players with it because I just wanted to. I felt like first level was too strong.
Okay.
And so I made them all start at level 0.
Mhm.
They picked a race, and they could have unconsciously picked a class, but they didn't officially pick a class. Their stats were unmodified by class, and they had to basically work and do things to level into their class, right?
Mhm.
So we started at level 0, and if you wanted to be a fighter, you had to join the military and go through training. And training entailed a bunch of, all of the all of the things you got proficiency bonuses in, right? Like strength or dexterity or any of those things. Those were all checks you had to make throughout the time that you're telling the story of your character,
Mhm.
right? You have to make these checks and you have to succeed at them in order to get the proficiencies, in order to become proficient in that skill. And it
Right.
was it I was young. I played it annoying. I'm sorry. Going back to it now, I wouldn't have done so many checks. I did a lot of frivolous checks in that campaign. But what it did was it made my players realize how strong at level 1 a character is, and then simultaneously really love the characters that they were playing.
Mhm.
Because that's the first campaign that I had 2 people actually come up to me and go, "Look, I've started with this guy, I really don't like him. Can I switch characters?" "Yes, but you're starting at 0 again." "Okay, fine."
That's kinda cool though. Like they went, "Yeah, that was annoying, but even though I didn't like the result, I know what I'm thinking. I just don't know how to say it." It's like,
I liked the process to get there. I just didn't like what my character became when they got there.
yeah, I think that's a good way to say it.
And it was both the players that had started with, like, joke characters.
Mhm.
And they were both like, "Well, everybody else is having a really good time with the serious characters. I think I wanna switch to a more serious character."
Mhm.
"Okay, fine. That's perfectly acceptable." But, I mean, that was me completely because D&D's not built for that in any stretch. You need to start at least at level 1.
Yeah.
More realistically, in more modern versions, you're starting at, like, level 3, level 5.
Yeah. Well, okay. Insert one of my little rants here. I the thing I don't like about first level in 5th edition is it feels like the game wants you to believe that you're a heroic character,
Mhm.
but because of the swinginess of the dice, you're very fragile at first level, or can be.
Can I be honest?
Mhm.
I think that is partially on onus on who we played when they were running the game,
Mhm.
because I have since gone back and reread some of that stuff because I've had a couple people come to me and be like, "Hey, you're this, RPG expert. Can you teach me how to play D&D?" And much to my chagrin, I was like, "Yeah, I can." And gone back and actually reread some of the challenge rating stuff. And once you understand the challenge rating stuff, that does mitigate that problem significantly.
Fair. I don't totally understand that challenge rating thing other than I know it's based around, like, 8 encounters per day or 6 encounters per day, but they're not all supposed to be combat, and I
Yes. So what you end up doing, there's a lot of math involved. And it is man, I don't have the book in front of me, but I want to say it's 6 encounters per day. And basically what you do is you calculate that out and then you divide by the number of encounters that you're actually going to have.
okay.
and you end up with a challenge rating that is fractionally smaller than it was originally. And you build around that challenge rating. So if you're not going to have 8 encounters per day, you calculate out player level and all that information for the 8 encounters per day, and then you divide all of that by 8, or by say you're only doing 4 encounters per day. Say you're only doing 4 is a reasonable number. You figure 2 social, 2 non-social, right?
Okay.
4 encounters per day, so you divide the number you basically take your challenge rating number and divide it by 2, because you're splitting it in half,
Mm-hmm.
and it produces a new challenge rating number. I mean, unless it's 1, but if your challenge rating is 1 already, you kind of can't go down from there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you could go to, like, there is challenge rating 1/2 and there is challenge rating 1/4, and you can absolutely do that, but with a 1 challenge rating, you're just sort of like, okay, we can just throw a challenge rating 1 monster at you, one of those, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they can handle that because a level 1 party should be able to handle that easily. It's just a lot more math than is sold up front.
Fair.
And I realized this and I was like, oh, I really thought this system was crunchy.
Yeah, well, see, I think that's the other thing is I always felt like 5th D&D in general, but 5th edition it's deceptively complex in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think that's part of its draw, though. I hate to say that, but I think that's part of the draw in, is that because I was teaching it to new players and they were like, this is like a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. Yeah, it is. But once you're in and you learned it, it becomes a lot less work.
Fair.
Like, once you've made your first character, yeah, it's crunchy. And I'm not saying it's not, but once you've made your first character, you realize that, oh, it's crunchy in these particular ways. Okay, we can work with that.
Yeah.
There are games that are crunchier.
Oh, yeah. There are. And I don't think crunch isn't like I'm not crunch averse. I like
No.
some crunch, but part of and this may just be a my brain issue, is that as a game gets crunchier, I start focusing on statistical manipulation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a problem that I've run into with crunchy games, is I start focusing on the numbers rather than focusing on the game.
Right.
I've run into that with a couple things. Sometimes, depending on who I'm playing with, my brain does not work like that. Okay. So I'm not good at all with numbers, right?
Mhm.
Like, we both played with somebody who's very analytical and very much constantly calculating things
Mhm.
and could tell you, oh, well, you need to do this here or that there. That's not how my brain works at all. And I don't understand how they got to those conclusions. You know what I mean?
Mhm. I have that side. I sometimes fight against it and sometimes I just don't.
Yeah, I don't have that side at all, and that's just because math has never been my subject.
Mhm.
Like, applied mathematics is fine, and I can do like probability to an extent. I understand that, but everything sort of past that, I'm like, I don't know. But that, like, quick damage calculation, quick math, but that quick damage calculation stuff, that's not me. But I think with really crunchy games, you get a lot of players who are very interested in that, and I think D&D can get that way depending on the play group you're playing with.
Yeah.
One of the things another thing I give D&D credit for is that it doesn't have to be played crunchy, or it doesn't have to be played like, it wants to be played combat heavy, but the reason it wants to be played combat heavy is because 9 times out of 10 when we play D&D, nobody wants to do the calculations for experience points.
Right.
So you do what is
Milestone
that?
leveling.
Milestone leveling. Well, milestone leveling is great if you're going in dungeons and fighting monsters, but experience points is fantastic if you're actually having social interactions and doing diplomacy. Because while they're doing diplomacy and passing checks, you can be, as the GM, quietly writing down 10 experience points, 10 experience points, 5 experience points. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
At the end of that session, even though there wasn't combat, you still are allotting and going, hey, you guys got this experience from having these conversations and working on your social skills.
Mhm.
But because 9 times out of 10 when we're playing Dungeons and Dragons, we're doing milestone, and I mean this in the literal we,
Right.
you don't get any of that reward from doing social interactions. So it feels like the only reward you get is by doing combat because big number feel good.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Yeah.
I know that's a really deep thought, but it's just something that I've come to the conclusion of because again, I'm not running, but about to start running 5th edition for a new player.
Mhm.
And so I had to make the conscious decisions of they want to learn how to play it, they want to learn how to run it. I have to show them the different ways, and that's one of the ways that I hardly ever played D&D. I always played with just milestone leveling.
Yeah. Well, but okay. What you're describing, though, you can, so to speak, effectively put into milestoning. You're counting other things toward it.
If you're going to take the effort to put that in, you might as well just give the if you're going to I don't mean this to be rude, but if you're going to take the effort to sit down and start counting other things towards it, you might as well just at the end of the session announce how many XP points your players got.
Yeah.
Like
Fair.
you're already if you're doing all this other calculation on your end, just give your players a little bit of hope and be like, "Hey, you earned 50 experience points today. Oh,
Yeah.
sweet. I'm halfway to a level." Right? Like
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I see. I guess maybe to a certain point, that's one of the things. So level based advancement feels wonky to me anymore in a lot of ways, and I get it. Right. It was a way to measure things, and it allows you to advance more uniformly, I guess, is a better way to put it.
yes, I don't know. I agree with you, and at the same time, I've come around and I've gone off of it, and I've come around, and there's just been some like brain power being spent on level based character advancement that on my end that I've been like, well, it's actually like I was a little adverse to it, and then now I'm coming back around to being like, level based isn't absolutely terrible.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I guess it's personal taste too, right?
Right. Yeah, that's another thing is all of this is going to be your taste and my taste could be completely different.
Right.
But like I said, it's one of those things where I've come to this conclusion where it's like, yes, I agree level based is a little bit can be a little bit daunting. Well, I wouldn't say daunting, but annoying in certain ways.
Yeah, well, okay. Here's and this, I guess, perhaps goes to what you were talking about is how we play games, right? I think that maybe one of the things that kind of ruffles my feathers with level-based advancement is that you just spent 2 or 3 levels slogging through dungeons.
Mhm.
Suddenly you got better at negotiation. All you've been doing is beating the crap out of stuff.
That's something that I think that's something that's a fault on how do I put this? That's a fault on the system because you could do level based and simultaneously you level up like you level up but the skills that you level up are specifically the skills that you've been using, right?
Yeah, which given the structure of 5th edition doesn't work that way.
Right, right. I agree. I completely agree. I think that's a fault of the system that definitely could be worked on, ironed out, specified in some way or another. I don't think they want to do that because sort of feels like the point of the system is to start off with an uneven character and then to end with an all around strong character.
Right.
And I understand that mentality. That's the hero mentality of like when you start out as a fighter, you're really only good at fighting. You shouldn't be very good at talking, right? Like
Mhm.
that's arguably the dump stat. Or you shouldn't be very good at thinking. That's another the dump stat. But as you progress through the story, you can pump points into making your intelligence, wisdom, charisma, all of that go up, you know?
Right.
And I think that's trying to make you a rounded out, like it's trying to make you the fighter, right? Like you're
Mhm.
the man who can go into the room and talk down the situation and also simultaneously everybody knows could kick their butt, right?
Yeah.
I think that's part of that, but I don't think it comes through well.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that it's done right. I'm just saying I don't think it comes through well. And I understand where you're coming from of like, yeah, it doesn't make any sense for me to go kill a bunch of monsters and then come out of a dungeon and be like, "Oh, look, I'm powerful now. I'm stronger now." And what am I stronger in? Well, I'm stronger in my social skills.
right. And in a lot of XP spend systems, if you want to call them that, there's no rules stating that you can't put points into skills you didn't use. That's one thing I love how Delta Green does skill advancement.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wonderful. Basically, for those unfamiliar with the system, it's D100 system roll under. Every time, or the first time every session that you make an unsuccessful check in an
Mhm.
ability, you put a little check mark by it. And then, depending on which edition of the character sheet you have, because they've revised it a time or two, it's either you add like 1 point, or it might be like D4 -1 to your rating in that skill.
Yeah, I was gonna say the version we played, I think, was D4 -1.
Yeah, some editions of the character sheet say 1, some say D4 -1. But what they're doing is, 1, you're only advancing skills that you actually use,
Mhm.
and 2, they're emulating learn from failure,
Right.
which I think it's great. I don't know how you translate that to D&D because the math doesn't work.
Well, the first thing I'll say about Delta Green and doing that, I think that's fine. And I appreciate that it's only once per session because that means that you're not constantly failing. You know what I mean? You're not
Right.
constantly failing these checks and then being like, well, now I'm great at this. You do learn from failure. And I think that's a really good thing. I think the only way you could do that with Dungeons and Dragons is if you implemented it on a critical failure. Like you failed so hard that you realize you screwed up and you have to spend some time learning this thing, right?
Right, but the +1 in D&D terms is much bigger than 1 to 3 points in a percentile system.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, yeah, I understand. I think that's why it has to be a critical failure,
Mhm.
right? Well, go back to house rules real quick. That's a house rule that we play with that everybody is like, "Oh, that's not a rule." Crit failing social checks, crit failing non-combat checks. What do they call those?
Well, skill checks.
Skill checks.
As written, the only criticals is combat
Right. You cannot crit fail a skill check. But
or saves.
yeah, I think you can. I believe well, you can crit fail death saves, which is the annoying part.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, the annoying part with the saves is that I can crit fail a death save and you have rules for that. Should be the same for any other save, but that's just beside the point. And that's a house rule that we play with because look, we were doing it earlier in the episode. When I sit here and go, brain, that's me literally failing to recall something I was trying to recall in my memory. That's me failing a wisdom check.
Right.
If I can't draw anything to mind, that's a critical failure, right? Like,
Fair.
but if I can draw a little bit of something to mind, that's just, if it's not exactly what I was trying to bring back up, well, that's a failure, right?
Mhm.
But a critical failure is when I'm just like, well, I don't know where that thought went. And it happens. It happens to everybody. But for whatever reason, they felt like that was an omission that they needed to add to the system. And they explicitly state it, which sort of irritates me because not a lot of things are explicitly stated in that system.
Yeah, that's an example of a house rule that I think a lot of people play with is, for D&D is crit either success or failure on skill checks.
Hmm.
Another one I used to do in Rifts revolved around initiative. And the way this was partially born out of, I had someone playing either a crazy and or a juicer. I had one player that played both during various points in the campaign, and they're both super powered characters in their weird way.
Hmm.
Okay. And one of the things that they get boosted reflexes and boosted speed. And so they end up with a lot of in Palladium for whatever possess them to do it, uses 15-second combat rounds. So some of these characters, most of your characters would have 3 to 4 attack actions per round.
It's a long time.
Yes. Well, but when you add a juicer or a crazy into the mix, sometimes you're talking 7, 8 actions per round.
Hmm.
Plus, because of their boosted reflexes, they've got stupid bonuses to initiative, so they're probably also going first. So you have person with a lot of actions going first almost every time. They get to have all the fun. By the time you get to the guy who rolled low initiative, there's nothing for him to do. By the time you know the Twinkie Avenger has 6 actions, and then on down. By the time you get to the fifth player, the thing's half dead, and they've been
Right.
sitting there for half an hour.
Right.
So what I used to do, and again, this was kind of something we agreed upon to kind of keep everyone involved, is we would go around the table taking one action each in initiative order, and then once you ran out of actions, you were done. So that ended up where the juicer or whatever would get a lot of their actions at the end of the round, as opposed to doing everything in a flurry at the top of the round.
Mm-hmm.
But they wouldn't get as many. I don't know. Like, I know exactly why we did it, and we seemed to think it worked okay. I don't know. I could have also been misunderstanding the action economy at that point. But, that's another example of something that, like I said, I've done to kind of just keep the whole table more involved.
Yeah, that's something keeping the table involved is really important.
Mm-hmm. I'm seriously tempted to try and port the Genesis Star Wars slot initiative system into damn near everything I play.
All right, you guys go here, you go here, you go here. You guys can fight over how you want to go.
Yeah, I wonder how that would play against D&D though, because of all the fiddly little rules around the action economy.
I think personally it would screw up the D&D action economy in a way that you weren't really intending to.
Mm-hmm.
What it does is it gives super analytical players sort of that upper edge. I think what it would do is I think it would suck the fun from the table, because you would have, not in every group, but when you have the super war gamer, the super analytical player, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think they would sit and go, all right, we got PC, then NPC, then PC, then NPC, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to go first, you cast this. You're going to go second, you do this. You should go third and do this. I'm going to go last and do this. Or I'm going to go whatever position and do this. And just fully lay out the entire turn.
Right. And then you add into that with D&D how with you don't get your reaction back until it's your turn, unless you further house rule that to say, everyone's reaction refreshes at the top of the initiative order. But then you have all the stuff about if you start your turn or you end your turn in a thing, and this effect lasts until the end of next turn, that player's next turn, and like there's
a lot of stuff that I think you would run into issues. Not that I think it's perfect, but I think the D&D initiative system is one of the more flushed out things that they've done, because they have to.
Well, the thing is, I think it's one of those things that by the time you add in all the intertwined systems to it with reactions and, spell effect durations and all that stuff, it's actually a much more involved system than almost anybody thinks it is when they just think about it.
Yeah. Well, and I hate to say this, but the D&D initiative system it's probably their longest lasting system that hasn't changed much.
Yeah, I mean, this version of the action economy uses it differently, but
Yeah, but the system itself hasn't changed.
true. Yeah, I don't see. This is the other thing.
Roll D20, add initiative modifier. All right, you end up on the list here. That's been true since Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a thing, though, what we were just talking about, though, is an example of where you wanna be careful making house rules, or at least be aware of it when you're making house rules, is that maybe your house rule ends up affecting, 3 different things in a cascade effect that wasn't what you end up making problems for yourself you didn't want.
I think that's one of those, the joke is always, I want to go off on a tangent on this. So let me say this first. the joke is always that the campaign doesn't survive first contact with players. I think that's true for that system as well. For your initiative thought is that your initiative wouldn't survive first contact with players, right? Like some house rules don't survive first contact, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some house rules you're like, okay, I think this will be good, and then you implement it and they break it in such a way that you're just going to be like, nope, we're going to throw that out unless you guys are really, really determined to play with it and do something else.
Mm-hmm.
And the tangent I wanted to go off on the idea of a campaign doesn't survive first contact with players, and I know we've gone off on a ton of tangents, but isn't that the point of a campaign? Like the point of the campaign is for you, the GM, and the players to have fun and to tell a unique story, right? Like if we wanted to tell the same, and they talked about this on a bit on to a tabletop. Liam talked about this a little bit. If you wanted to tell a story, write a book, right? Like you want to tell a story that isn't like completely random and it doesn't have these wild changes. Fine. There's ways to express that. Write a book, create an audio drama, do something.
Right.
Tabletop's not necessarily the place for that, right? Like you can have a story and be like, I want my players to be involved in this story, but if they don't care and they don't want to be involved in that story, they're not going to do it. And you railroading them hard to get them to do that story is not going to make them enjoy it anymore.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, that goes to the idea behind a sandbox, where I've said it before. A sandbox, as the GM, you have to have all these bits and pieces and moving parts going on that are happening regardless of what the players do.
Right.
In addition to action consequence with the players, you have to have a planned out set of events, kind of like how when we talked with Justin Eacock about pacing, how he was saying, at this time mark in this adventure, this is going to happen regardless of where the party is at. That's I think, you can't, and that's not railroading, that's having a living world.
Yeah, that's different though. What I'm more talking about is and I don't know if you listened to this episode, it was a couple weeks ago.
I'm a little behind.
But yeah, Liam was talking about, being frustrated with a GM who was like, "No, this is my story." And basically, I've heard it other places too. It was something that sort of popped up recently as a conversation topic. But this idea that you as the GM are so set on telling this particular story that the players cannot screw up your story. Please get that out of your head, because you will find nothing but disappointment the entire time you're trying to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying this to be rude to anybody. I'm not saying this. It's just a bad GMing tactic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there are things that you can do to keep your players on task. If you have a problem with keeping players on task, that's a different issue than you have a problem of the players not following your story. The players may not be interested in telling your story. So find out the story that they want to tell.
Yeah.
Listen to what they're telling you, because they're there to have fun too. And if you enjoy telling stories, backburner that one you had planned and tell the story that the players want to try and tell, and make it your own and give it your twist. And you can incorporate parts of your other story into that. And maybe, just maybe, if you work with them, the next time you try and tell that story, they'll work with you.
Yeah.
And that is the handshake. That is the gaming handshake of like, I scratch your back, you scratch mine, right? Like, I'm going to give you a lead here because you guys were wanting to go down this path. In exchange, I'm going to throw a dragon at you a couple chapters from now, and hopefully, as long as I did everything right, you guys should be wanting to chase that dragon.
Right. Yeah. It's not just, like you said, if you're have this grand narrative all plotted out, that's, yeah. And like, I don't know how to say it. Like, this is where, when I talk about, planning in bullet points, that's kind of what I mean, right? Like, you have this kind of in your head, this structure of events that okay, this is going to happen, and then based on how the players react to that, that determines where we go next.
So what I'm gonna say is that yes, but also be prepared to completely throw out your bullet points and role play.
Yeah,
Like that's something that it's something that like I talk about improvisation and not everybody's good at improv. That's fine. But if you're playing role playing games, you need to be prepared to roll with what the players are doing and roll with what the world is doing. And to say improv is a daunting term, but you need to understand that you're in control of the world, not the players.
yeah, that's that's a weird thing to say, but I understand exactly what you mean.
Well, what I'm driving at is that in our Wednesday night Mutant City Blues game, I have no control over when one of my players wants to start licking the shoes of children. And I hope he listens to this episode. But legitimately, I have no control over when one of my players is going to use something like that. Like, granted, I can be like, whoa, no, but I can't necessarily control that, right?
Yeah,
And I have to accept the fact that I can't control that. What I
right,
can control is where the story goes after that
right.
and how the people around him react to that are not players, right? How the NPCs react to that.
Exactly.
And that's where you have control of the world and not the players, right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah, we talk about curveballs a lot, and that's one of those things where the easiest way to roll with curveballs is to accept the fact that you have very little agency over what your players actually physically do.
yeah. No, that's exactly you're right, and yeah, I know exactly what you're saying, I just don't know how to add to what you've said.
Yeah. Started rough, ended strong. All right, game of the week.
Is it time for game of the week then?
I think so. I think
Alright.
we've said a lot
Yeah,
tonight.
I have no idea what the heck I'm gonna title this one because it's, Tangents and House Rules or House Rule Tangents or I don't know.
Uh,
We went,
we
yeah.
got lost in a house.
Braining. Anyway,
That's what you should just call it braining.
there
That's
we
it.
go.
There you go.
Episode title. Alright. So much for House Rules. Alright. How about some Game of the Week action then?
Yeah, let's do it.
Woo! Game of the Week!
Game of the week. Game of the week.
Alright. You going first or am I going first?
You know what? You go first because I think I have a game, but I just want to do a little bit of poking on it first.
Okay. So I'm gonna go with one. I've been sitting on this one for a while. And this is a game I really want to try it out. Game called Mashed.
Oh, I hate you.
Hey, look, I've been sitting on this one for months.
I know because I was talking about it months ago, and
Well, I think I showed you it when I found it.
you did because I was like, go ahead and explain what mashed is, and then we'll talk about it because I got thoughts.
Oh, this is welcome for more tangents. So what this is, it's powered by the apocalypse, and it is a game about mobile army surgical hospitals in the Korean War.
Mhm, mhm,
You
mhm.
might recognize this theme due to a rather well-known television show that went by a very similar moniker.
Yeah, what are you? Who are you playing as? Well, we're Mash 4066.
Yeah. So, uh, this game though is not, and it specifically says in the bottom of the listing, Mashed is not based on or derived from, or should not be implied as an official or authorized part of the MASH media franchise. MASH is a registered trademark for 20th Century Fox Film Corporation.
Right. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I read somewhere, and I'm not seeing it in the listing, so I must have looked it up on the publisher's website or something. What they actually did is a lot of the source material that they used in researching this game is the exact same source material that was used to write the television series.
Okay. I see.
So,
Draw your own conclusions from that.
is it MASH, the role playing game with the serial numbers filed off? They're defining it as not.
Yeah. Could it be?
It very much could be. Yes, exactly. And the thing that I think, because I absolutely love that television series,
Oh, I do too. I might watch some of that tonight. I haven't watched it in a while.
because it's so much of it's everything, and yet at its core, it's stories about how the war affected people.
Right.
It's not about the war itself.
It's not about the war itself. It's not about the surgeries. It's about the characters.
Right.
And I think that's the fact that it's PBTA makes me really happy because I think that's what PBTA does well. Granted, don't know this for a fact, haven't played any Powered by the Apocalypse games, but
Right.
saying from everything I understand about Powered by the Apocalypse, that's what PBTA does right. When I
Mhm.
first approached you about this, I was like, man, I want to play a MASH game. And I was going to set it using, I was going to use Twilight 2000. And you're like, no, don't do that. I'm like, really? You're like, yeah, use this. But
Yeah.
I mean, that show, I don't know. Some of the darkest moments of that show are like it, some of the darkest, most serious moments of that show are not about anything actually graphically happening, but the characters' reactions to something happening.
Well, classic example of that is the scene, and I don't remember what season, but you know what I'm talking about when Radar O'Reilly comes in to announce the thing about Colonel Blake's plane.
Yeah.
And that
Well, I just think of it wasn't a chicken.
yeah, that one too. That was that from Goodbye Farewell, Amen?
I think so. I think that was the ending.
Yeah.
But
But the
that's a moment that it's a character telling a story.
right.
That's not a moment that you see anything. You hear some stuff, but you don't see anything.
Yeah. Yeah, but it just is that series told so many good stories.
Well, an innocuous episode I watched the other day, the whole episode, like, not the whole episode, but a big part of the episode was about the colonel that had showed up on base and was all upset because they weren't doing surgery on this guy. And all the shenanigans that went on on the MASH base when, at night.
Mhm.
And he went in, he talked to I can't remember his name, Alan Alda,
Hawkeye.
Hawkeye. Hawkeye was like, "No, we're not doing surgery till 3 a.m. I need to make sure that he can hold blood." And the colonel was so incensed, he had to go talk to the higher ups. And he stomped around the base and ran into every single character on that base until he got every character talked to and found the head honcho. It was 3 a.m. We're doing surgery now. Cut to the end of that episode with him going, "Well, you're one hell of a surgeon." And he's like, "Just don't question my method. Just accept it." Like,
Yeah.
there's a method to the madness. And that's a character moment. None of that had anything, it was a goofy episode that ended with this realization that, oh, these guys are good at what they do.
Yeah, and some of it is, if you think about it from a yeah, there were a lot of very comedic moments in the show, right? But there was a lot of it where if you think about it, the comedy was just the characters dealing with the stresses of the environment they were in.
Well, I'm not saying it's good. Klinger, always did drag, and they always played it up for laughs. But the reason Klinger did drag was so that he could get kicked out of the army for being crazy.
Yeah.
Like, that was the point of him doing that, was so that he would get so they'd be like, "No, you're nuts. Get out of here." That's a really dark concept.
Yeah, yeah, the whole yeah, there was so much behind the surface levity of that, I don't know, I just it's a show that well, I've referenced it too, like, okay, one of my favorite, if you will, antagonists, and I say favorite in quotation marks, right? Frank Burns.
Mhm.
I have a frickin' reaction every time I see that character on the screen, and yet, really, for the most part, he's just a doofus.
Yeah.
But you end up having this reaction to him, right?
Yeah. I We could talk about MASH for a long time, and I really would love to, but to tell that kind of story in an RPG would be fantastic. I will say that is one of those ones where if I were to ever play a MASH RPG that has some very, very heavy content warnings, at the least, because I have friends who've been in the military and I have family who've been in the military, and I know from their reactions to just watching the show of MASH that they're like, "Yeah, I love this show, but I can't watch it." You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that if I were to run that for a group of people, we would have to have like some games you can have a little bit less a little bit less safety tools than others. I think that's one of those games that you have to have a lot and very open about the safety tools and the fact that, you know, hey, this is going to deal in themes that are very deep, very hard to swallow pills, and you know, if it's something that you can't handle, we can stop, we can move on, but you know, we can fade to black, we could even cut the entire bit, but understand we might touch on something, we might touch a nerve, and that's something you have to definitely explain,
Yeah.
especially to, and I don't mean this to be rude, but to someone younger who's never experienced MASH, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I think as you get, at least as I've gotten older, I see the television show differently.
Yeah.
Initially it was often a lot of yucks.
Well, there is a lot of yucks. There is a lot of yucks in those episodes. But
Yes.
yeah, when you look at the deeper story and context is everything with that show.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's so many layers to a lot of it. And like you said, we could probably both talk about that for a long
2
time.
hours. Yeah. I love MASH so much.
But
But
yeah, I mean, this has mechanics that you have surgical moves, but you also have stress points, which says that can to affect personalities and even change the roles your characters are playing. So I'm assuming in a powered by the apocalypse context, that means you might, I don't know if you change playbooks or if there's like, what do you want to say, sub roles within the playbooks.
I don't know. This is the game that's going to get me to play Powered by the Apocalypse. I'm just
I
telling you now.
I yeah, I need to read this badly.
Yeah. You and me both.
But it
Um
yeah, it just looks, and, like, some of the, because there's, like, mini reviews and stuff about this, all through the listing on Drive-Thru, and one of them, let me find it. This is from one of the co-creators of Apocalypse World, it says, "Mashed weaves history and military procedure through the game in a totally fitting way, doesn't dwell on or ignore the challenges of the era from modern eyes, features brilliant use of countdown clocks and wounds," and that's from Megway Baker, who
mhm.
was co-creator, co-designer of Apocalypse World, which of course is where Powered by the
Right.
Apocalypse all comes from.
Right.
But yeah, this boy, it looks like it could be a really powerful game, but I think you're very good to point out that you would want to have some safety tools and some serious session zero discussion about this game, because it could turn very dark very quickly, and depending on everyone's life experiences, could really hit some nerves.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, and yeah, that's very thematic for the show of MASH too,
Oh, yes.
because I've watched that show and it's hit a nerve time or two, and I've been like, okay, that's touching some feelings.
Yeah, yeah.
But
All right. So that was mine. That's again for those that didn't catch us. That the name of the game is Mashed. Mashed.
yep,
No asterisk and such like the television show. But
yeah, no, it's it is as stated more than just the numbers filed off, but
yeah, I think it's giving you a chance to make your own version of it. Not just, oh look, here you can be the characters from the TV show. This is about telling that kind of story, but not being that.
right, right. All right. Well, my game is not that deep or heavy or any of those things.
Okay.
My game is a brand new game, and I mean brand new as in added today. It is called Agent Provocateur.
Okay.
I'm sending you a link.
Okay. I'll
Just,
finish writing
just
things down.
boop. All right. Where do I start with this? Okay. I'll start with the tagline and then I'll explain my thought process.
Oh, you son of a gun, you.
What?
Provocateur.
All right, so Agent Provocateur, you are a special agent who works for the secret counterterrorism organization known as the Feline Operations Group. Together with your fellow agents, you travel the world, stopping dastardly villains from carrying out diabolical plans. Travel to exotic locales, investigate mysteries, fight henchmen, save the world in this GM-less, no-prep game of heroic daring do for one or more players. You play as cats. It's the pun.
Yes.
And it's GM-less because I don't hardly ever pick GM-less games. But
Ages 6 and up, too.
yeah, this could be a fun game for kids. What I was going to say is a terrible movie, but in the 90s, there was a movie called Cats and Dogs. And the basic premise of the movie is that, like, cats and dogs fight, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what if they were both like super secret spy agencies?
Mm-hmm.
And that was basically the premise is like the cats are evil and the dogs are the good guys and they're both spy agencies. So it's all this counter spy stuff and like that type of story. I saw this and my brain was like, ooh, that reminds me of that thing from when I was younger. And it's goofy. It's silly. I think my friends that really like cats would probably really enjoy this game. But yeah, I know a lot of people who really like cats, and I was like, this could be fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, just a fun, goofy GM-less game about being a cat spy.
Mm-hmm. And
Or
it'll
a
set you back
cat
all of
burglar.
$3.
Yeah. And
That does look like it could be fun.
it'll make Steve mad because he realized the pun.
Oh, well. It's all good fun.
Yeah. Well, with all of that being said, we had a fantastic episode tonight. But we want to thank everyone for listening. As always, links to everything are in the show notes, including Facebook, Twitter, Discord, TikTok, and soon to be some other things.
Patreon.
Patreon's
if you
there.
feel like helping us out.
Yeah, if you feel like throwing a little bit of money our way, it'd be much appreciated. You get some cool stuff. We got some cool guests lined up, and one of our Patreon tiers allows you to ask questions to guests as they come onto the show. So with all that being said, we want to thank you for listening and remind you to be kind to one another and get out there and play some RPGs.
Yep. Take care, y'all.
Intro and outro music by the band 12 Noon. You can email us at meandsteverpg@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter and RPGs. Find us on Facebook at Me and Steve RPG Podcast. On Discord at Me and Steve RPGs. And as always, all of these links are in the show notes. Thank you, and be kind to one another.
How much for the cigar?
Cigar, $20, dog. You gotta go down the street to the store and buy that.
Oh, all right. Shall we try and put this wagon on the road?
We try and put the wagon on the tracks. All right, let's go.
Okay, wagon on the tracks.
Train's coming. So, we wanted to talk about something. Nope. You do that. You do that bit.
I do that bit? Okay.
You do that bit. My brained.
Your brained. All right. Well, my brain will brain, and then brain.
Seth Skorkowski on his Twitter had posted, I had created, made a tweet. What?
Yeah, had tweeted or twitted or
tweeted?
I don't know.
We are old. You are old. I am old. We are old. I can't brain and you are old, I think is the problem.
There we go. Between us, we have an IQ 1.5 and it's running away.
Yeah. I killed the last brain cell I had. I don't know why. I did it on accident. I definitely did not intend to sit on it. But
Stoppity stop.
I know it was a very rambling episode, but I liked that episode.